The night was alive with drunken laughter as 6 college friends made their way to the secluded cabin deep in the woods. It was supposed to be the ultimate weekend getaway, a chance to drink, party, and escape the monotony of city life. Unknown to them, the cabin's dark history whispered through the trees. Decades ago, under the eerie glow of a blood moon, a deranged man had butchered an entire family, leaving the property abandoned, cursed, and forgotten. As the group settled in, strange occurrences began. Footsteps creaked on the porch, though no one was outside. A window shattered upstairs, the cold wind howling through. Dismissing it as pranks or wildlife, they carried on, oblivious to the terror watching them from the shadows. The first scream came from the woods. Mark, the adventurous one, had wandered off to gather firewood. When he didn't return, the others assumed he was playing a joke. That is, until his body was hurled through the cabin window, his torso slashed open, organs spilling out like grotesque confetti. Panic set in as the group realized they were being hunted. A figure emerged from the tree, lean, tall, hulking, and carrying a machete glinting with fresh blood. His mask, cracked and stained with gore, hid his identity, but the hatred in his stance was palpable. One by one, the killer picked them off in the most brutal ways imaginable. Sarah was dragged into the basement, where the killer pinned her to a table and slowly drove nails into her hands before slicing her throat. Jason, the tough guy of the group, tried to fight back but was subdued. The killer tied him to a tree, carving symbols into his flesh while he screamed into the endless night. Emily, trembling with fear, tried to escape through the forest but fell into a trap, a spiked pit that impaled her, leaving her gasping for air as her blood soaked the ground. Only Lily remained, the quiet and unassuming one. Driven by adrenaline and sheer will to survive. Traps around the cabin. The killer underestimated her, stepping into a bear trap she had hidden by the door. His guttural roar echoed through the forest, but even injured, he was relentless. Lily armed herself with a hunting knife and faced him in a brutal showdown. The fight was savage. He slashed at her, cutting deep into her arm, but she managed to stab him repeatedly, each blow fueled by the memories of her friend's agonized screams. As dawn broke, Lily emerged from the cabin, bloodied but alive. Yet, as she stumbled away, she noticed the moon still hanging low in the sky, blood red and full. Even as the sun rose, the ground trembled, and a voice whispered from the woods, "You can't leave. The curse is eternal." Behind her, the killer's body was gone. Lily turned, her scream swallowed by the forest as the blood moon's curse claimed its next victim. Lily awoke in the cabin, her wounds crudely bandaged. The morning sun seeped through the shattered windows, yet the woods outside seemed darker, the silence suffocating. She couldn't remember how she got back inside. She stumbled to the door, her heart pounding as she tried to escape. But the forest stretched infinitely, her every step leading her back to the cursed cabin. The blood moon hung unnaturally in the sky, visible even in daylight, its crimson glow casting long, distorted shadows. Desperation turned to terror when she discovered the bodies of her friends, mutilated and posed in grotesque tableaus. Mark was strung up like a scarecrow, his mouth sewn shut. Sarah's decapitated head sat on the fireplace mantel, her eyes wide with eternal horror. Lily screamed, but her voice felt hollow in the oppressive stillness. While searching for answers, Lily stumbled upon a hidden trapdoor beneath a tattered rug. Descending into the darkness, she found a secret room filled with crude carvings on the walls, symbols of the blood moon and the masked killer. In the corner lay a journal, its pages soaked with dried blood. The journal revealed the story of the killer, a man named Elias, who had been a victim of the blood moon's curse. Decades ago, he had been a mild-mannered farmer until the moon's glow drove him mad. He butchered his family and others who wandered near, his mask a relic forged in agony. The journal ended abruptly with the words, "The blood moon chooses. It will not stop." Lily's blood froze when she turned the last page. A drawing of the cabin showed 6 stick figures, her friends, crossed out in red. Beside them was a 7th figure, circled. It was her. A sudden crash above snapped Lily out of her daze. Heavy footsteps creaked across the floorboards, the sound growing louder as they approached the trapdoor. Heart racing, she extinguished her lantern, plunging the room into darkness. The trapdoor creaked open, and the masked killer's silhouette loomed above. Lily held her breath, gripping the hunting knife she had found in the cellar. The killer descended slowly, his machete scraping against the walls. As he neared, she lunged, plunging the knife into his side. The killer barely flinched, swatting her aside like a rag doll. Her head struck the wall, stars dancing in her vision. Lily awoke tied to a chair, her arms and legs bound tightly with barbed wire. Elias stood before her, his mask removed. His face was a grotesque mix of scars and burns. His eyes glowing faintly with the blood moon's light, he began carving symbols into her skin, each slice deliberate and excruciating. As her blood pooled on the floor, she felt a strange heat coursing through her veins, her vision blurring. Elias leaned in, his voice a guttural growl. "You've been chosen, Lily. The moon demands a new harbinger." Her screams echoed through the cabin as the curse began to take hold. When the blood moon rose again, the forest fell silent. A lone figure emerged from the cabin, dragging a machete behind her. "Lily!" Lost in the endless forest as Lily carried her prey back to the clearing where the ritual would take place, Mia pleaded for her life, tears streaming down her face, but Lily's mind was too far gone. With the blood moon illuminating the scene, she tied Mia to a makeshift altar, her screams piercing the night. As Lily recited the ritual, the ground began to tremble. Shadows swirled around her, coalescing into the form of Elias. He watched with an approving nod as the blood moon's light intensified, bathing the forest in an otherworldly glow. Lily hesitated for a moment, her humanity flickering in her tear-filled eyes. But the whispers of her friends returned, urging her on. With a single, devastating blow, she plunged her machete into Mia's chest. The blood moon pulsed violently, its light blinding. The woods erupted with an unearthly roar, and the cabin shook as the curse was lifted, or so Lily thought. As dawn broke, Lily found herself standing in the middle of the forest, alone. The blood moon had vanished, replaced by the pale light of morning. Relief washed over her as she dropped the machete, sinking to her knees, but the peace was short-lived. From the corner of her eye, she saw a figure approaching, a man, his face obscured by a cracked mask. Her heart sank as she realized the truth. The curse didn't end, it had merely shifted. Elias was gone, but she had taken his place as the eternal harbinger of the blood moon's wrath. The first victim of her new reign stumbled into the clearing, a lost camper with fear etched across his face. Lily picked up the machete, her hands trembling as the blood moon began to rise once more. She smiled bitterly, the last vestiges of her humanity dissolving. "Welcome to the massacre." The lost camper trembled as Lily approached, her machete glinting in the faint light of the rising blood moon. His cries for help echoed through the forest, swallowed by the oppressive silence. Though her body moved with a cruel confidence, her mind screamed in rebellion. A sliver of her old self begged her to stop, but the blood moon's power was overwhelming. She raised the blade, savoring his terrified expression. With a swift, merciless swing, she ended his life, his blood pooling at her feet. The woods seemed to sigh with satisfaction, the moon glowing brighter. Her transformation was complete. She was no longer Lily, she was the blood moon's servant, its butcher. Weeks passed. Though time held no meaning under the blood moon's reign. The forest became her hunting ground, a labyrinth of death. Hikers, campers, and curious thrill-seekers all fell victim to her. She toyed with some, letting their fear build to a crescendo before striking. Others were dispatched quickly, their blood feeding the insatiable curse. Each kill deepened her connection to the blood moon. It whispered to her, promising power and eternal life in exchange for obedience. Yet, deep within, fragments of her old self lingered, a silent, anguished witness to the carnage. One stormy night, a survivor stumbled into the forest, a man named Alex, whose sister had vanished on the trail weeks earlier. Armed with determination and an arsenal of weapons, he had come to uncover the truth. Alex discovered the cabin, now a macabre shrine adorned with blood-soaked relics of Lily's victims. As he explored, he found her journal, detailing the curse and her descent into madness. Unlike the others, Alex didn't flee. He prepared traps, determined to end the blood moon's reign, no matter the cost. Lily sensed Alex's presence before she saw him. The blood moon's whispers grew urgent, commanding her to kill him. But this time, something was different. His resolve, it sparked a flicker of humanity within her. The battle was brutal. Alex's trap slowed her but didn't stop her. They clashed in the cabin, the walls splattered with fresh blood. Alex fought with everything he had, using fire, knives, and his wits to outmaneuver her. "Lily, fight it!" he shouted as he dodged a swing of her machete. His words struck a chord, momentarily breaking the moon's hold on her, but the blood moon would not relinquish its harbinger so easily. It surged through her veins, forcing her to strike. She slashed at Alex, wounding him, but he retaliated with a flare gun, setting her shoulder ablaze. Alex, barely clinging to life, realized what had to be done. The journal mentioned a way to sever the curse. The harbinger had to willingly destroy the source of their power, the blood moon itself. As Lily stood over him, machete raised, he held up a shard of the mirror from the cellar. Her reflection stared back at her, bloodied and broken, but unmistakably human. For the first time in months, she saw herself, not as a killer, but as a victim. The blood moon screamed in her mind, its light pulsing violently. Summoning the last of her strength, Lily turned her machete on the altar at the heart of the cabin, shattering it. The forest erupted in chaos as the blood moon's glow dimmed. Shadows writhed and dissipated, the oppressive aura lifting. Lily collapsed, her body trembling as the curse released its grip. When Lily awoke, the forest was silent. The blood moon had vanished, replaced by a normal, pale moon. Alex lay beside her, alive but gravely injured. She helped him to his feet, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I'm so sorry." Together, they limped out of the woods, leaving the cabin and its horrors behind. But as they reached the edge of the forest, Lily glanced back one last time. Distance, the faintest hint of a crimson glow lingered in the sky. Lily and Alex emerged from the woods, but the horrors they endured followed them. Alex, his body scarred and bruised, vowed never to return. Lily, however, couldn't shake the whispers. The blood moon might have vanished, but its presence lingered in her mind like a parasite. She spent her nights staring at the sky, waiting for its return. Her sleep was filled with vivid nightmares of her hands drenched in blood and her friends' screams echoing in the darkness. She began to question if the curse had truly lifted or if it had burrowed deeper into her soul. Weeks passed, and Alex tried to rebuild his life. He moved to a distant city, away from forests and trails. Yet one evening, while watching the news, a headline froze him in place: mutilated bodies discovered near Crescent Woods. The details were eerily familiar: deep lacerations, missing limbs, and bloodied symbols carved into the victims. Alex couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his gut. Against his better judgment, he reached out to Lily. When she didn't answer, he drove to her apartment, only to find it abandoned. Scrawled across the walls in red paint, or perhaps blood, was a chilling phrase: "The moon always rises again." Lily was no longer herself. The blood moon's power hadn't left, it had merely evolved, taking root inside her. She wandered from town to town, leaving a trail of blood and terror in her wake. At first, she tried to resist, but the whispers grew louder, commanding her to kill. Her victims varied: a drifter in a dark alley, a family camping by the river, a couple walking home late at night. Each kill fed the presence within her, making her stronger and darker. She began carving symbols into her own flesh, the pain binding her closer to the curse. The more she killed, the clearer her purpose became. She was the blood moon's chosen harbinger, and its rise would signal her ultimate. Plagued by guilt and desperation, began his own investigation. He sought out paranormal experts, historians, and anyone who could shed light on the curse. He discovered ancient texts detailing the blood moon's cyclical nature and its need for a vessel to enact its will. The only way to end the cycle was to destroy the harbinger completely, not just their body, but their very essence. It was a fate worse than death, requiring a ritual that would consume both the harbinger and the one performing it. Despite the cost, Alex made his decision. He armed himself with everything he could: blades, fire, and knowledge. Alex tracked Lily to a remote town, where reports of grisly murders had terrified the locals. The air was thick with tension as he entered the abandoned factory where she had made her lair. The walls were painted with blood, and the stench of death hung heavy. "Lily!" he shouted, his voice echoing. "You don't have to do this." Her laughter answered him, cold and hollow. "It's not me, Alex. It's us." She emerged from the shadows, her once familiar face now twisted with malice. Her eyes glowed faintly red, and her hands gripped a bloodied machete. Their fight was brutal, a chaotic dance of survival and destruction. Alex's weapons tore into her, but she seemed almost impervious, driven by an unnatural force. "Lily, fight it!" he yelled as he blocked a swing of her machete. "You're stronger than this." For a moment, her expression softened, and tears welled in her eyes. But the blood moon's whispers returned, louder and more insistent, drowning out her humanity. With a scream of rage, she charged at him, but Alex was ready. He activated the ritual, chanting the incantation he had memorized. A circle of fire erupted around them, trapping them both. As the flames rose, Lily's movements slowed. The blood moon's power began to waver, its hold on her weakening. She dropped her machete, clutching her head as she screamed and stepped closer. tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry, Lily. This is the only way." He plunged a ceremonial dagger into her heart, and the fire engulfed them both. Lily's body convulsed as the curse was torn from her, its energy Months passed after Alex's sacrifice, and the town returned to a fragile sense of normalcy. The murders ceased, the blood moon no longer glowed, and the cursed woods were declared off-limits. Yet the locals spoke in hushed whispers about the strange occurrences that persisted: animals fleeing the forest, a chilling wind that howled at night, and shadows that moved when no one was watching. Among those who had survived the ordeal, none dared to speak of Lily or Alex. But deep in the heart of the cursed woods, something stirred. Beneath the charred remains of the ritual site, a faint heartbeat throbbed, a rhythm synchronized with the cycles of the moon. Years later, a group of thrill-seekers ventured into the woods, armed with cameras and bravado. They were young, reckless, and eager to document the infamous Blood Moon Forest for their horror channel. "People say the Blood Moon curse is just a legend," one of them said, shining his flashlight into the dense underbrush. "But we're here to prove it's nothing more than an old wives' tale." Their laughter echoed through the trees as they set up camp near the ruins of the old cabin. But as the night deepened, the air grew colder, and an unnatural silence blanketed the forest. One of them, a girl named Mia, noticed something odd, a faint crimson glow pulsing in the distance. "Do you see that?" she whispered. "No way," another replied, grabbing his camera. "Let's check it out." The group followed the glow to the charred ritual site, where the ground seemed to pulse with a faint, rhythmic light. Mia's gut churned as she approached, feeling an unseen force tug at her mind. Suddenly, the glow intensified, and the ground split open, revealing a buried altar covered in blood-stained runes. A low, guttural growl emanated from the earth as the group stumbled back in terror. "We need to leave now!" Mia screamed, but it was too late. A figure emerged from the shadows, its form shrouded in mist and moonlight. It resembled a human, but its skin glistened like wet obsidian, and its eyes burned with an unholy red light. "Lily?" one of them stammered, recognizing the distorted figure from old photos of the missing girl. But it wasn't Lily, not anymore. She was the Blood Moon incarnate, her body a vessel for its eternal hunger. The figure moved with inhuman speed, tearing through the group with savage precision. Limbs were severed, screams echoed, and the forest floor was painted with fresh blood. Mia, the last survivor, fled blindly through the trees, her breath ragged and her heart pounding. As she stumbled into a clearing, she tripped over something cold and metallic: Alex's ceremonial dagger. Still stained with Lily's blood, the whispers began, faint at first but growing louder. They spoke of the blood moon's endless cycle and the need for a new sacrifice to contain its power. Mia clutched the dagger, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She could feel the curse pulling her, tempting her with promises of survival in exchange for submission. Behind her, the figure that had once been Lily approached, its machete dripping with blood. "End it," a voice echoed in Mia's mind. Whether it was Alex, Lily, or the blood moon itself, she couldn't tell. As the creature lunged, Mia drove the dagger into her own chest, her scream piercing the night. The forest erupted in light as the curse fought to survive, its energy tearing through her. When the light faded, Mia lay lifeless in the clearing. The blood moon's glow had vanished, and the oppressive silence lifted. The forest, for the first time in centuries, felt still. But in the distance, on the horizon, the faintest glimmer of crimson flickered against the night sky, a reminder that some curses are never truly broken. In the clearing, the dagger buried deep in her chest. The blood moon's glow faded, leaving only the faint rustling of leaves. For hours, the forest seemed to breathe a sigh of relief until her eyes snapped open. But they weren't Mia's eyes anymore, they burned crimson, flickering like embers. The curse had not been vanquished, it had chosen her as its new host. Slowly, she stood, the ceremonial dagger clutched tightly in her hand, now gleaming with an unholy light. In the nearby town, people began disappearing again. The first was a young couple on a midnight drive, their car found abandoned with the doors ripped off. The second was a jogger whose headphones and bloodied shoes were discovered on a trail leading into the forest. The locals, still scarred by the previous Blood Moon massacre, whispered about its return. They warned their children to stay indoors and bolted their doors at night, but it wasn't enough. Mia, or the entity she had become, could sense their fear. The blood moon fed on it, growing stronger with each victim. Unbeknownst to the townsfolk, Alex's sacrifice had not fully claimed him. His spirit lingered in the woods, bound to the ceremonial dagger. His voice whispered through the trees, guiding those brave or foolish enough to venture into the cursed forest. One such person was Carter, a retired police detective who had investigated the original massacre. Haunted by the case and driven by guilt for failing to stop it, he returned to Crescent Woods armed with a shotgun, flares, and a grim determination. As he moved through the dense underbrush, the whispers grew louder. "Find the blade," they urged. "End the cycle." The deeper Carter ventured, the more the forest seemed to resist him. Trees twisted unnaturally, blocking his path, and the air grew heavy with the stench of decay. He found symbols carved into the bark, bleeding sap that resembled fresh. Then came the screams, distant, anguished cries that echoed through the woods. Carter gripped his shotgun tightly, his heart pounding. He knew these weren't human screams, they were the cries of the curse itself, warning him to turn back, but he pressed on, driven by an unshakable need to end the nightmare once and for all. Carter reached the clearing where Mia had fallen, only to find her standing there, her back turned to him. She wore a tattered dress soaked in blood, her movements unnaturally graceful. "Mia?" He called out, his voice trembling. She turned slowly, her face a mask of sorrow and rage. Her eyes glowed brighter than ever, and in her hand, she held the ceremonial dagger. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice distorted as if layered with countless others. Before Carter could react, she lunged at him with inhuman speed. He fired his shotgun, the blast tearing into her shoulder, but it barely slowed her. Carter scrambled to his feet, clutching the dagger he had wrestled from her grasp during the struggle. The whispers guided his hand as he began chanting the ancient incantation Alex had discovered years before. Mia screamed, her voice splitting the night as the ground beneath them cracked open, revealing a swirling void of crimson light. The blood moon's power poured forth, engulfing them both in a storm of energy and violence. Carter knew what he had to do. He drove the dagger into the ground, anchoring the curse to the void. The forest erupted in chaos as the blood moon fought back, its energy tearing through the trees and sky. Carter's body began to disintegrate, his very essence consumed by the ritual. "Mia!" He shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. "Fight it! You're stronger than this." For a moment, her face softened, and the crimson glow in her eyes flickered. But the blood moon's hold. With his final breath, Carter channeled all his strength into the dagger, sealing the void and banishing the curse. For now, when the dust settled, the forest was silent once more. The blood moon had vanished, and Mia's body lay lifeless at the center of the clearing, but the curse was not destroyed. Deep in the woods, the dagger remained, its blade pulsating faintly with an unearthly light, and somewhere, far away, the faint glimmer of crimson appeared on the horizon, promising that the blood moon would rise again. Carter's sacrifice rippled through the cursed forest, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The void had closed, the blood moon's glow had vanished, and for the first time in centuries, the woods felt still. But as the first light of dawn crept through the trees, Mia's body twitched. Her crimson eyes flickered open, dim and hollow, as if the curse still lingered, trapped within her. She stumbled to her feet, her movements sluggish, no longer the predator she once was but something half alive, tethered to the curse's fading power. She wandered aimlessly, clutching the ceremonial dagger, her mind a shattered mosaic of the girl she had been and the monster she had become. Hours passed, and Mia reached the edge of Crescent Woods. The town lay before her, bathed in the golden light of morning. Children played in the streets, oblivious to the horrors that had unfolded mere miles away. The sight of life innocent, untouched, drove Mia to her knees. She screamed, a guttural, tortured sound that echoed through the trees. The curse's whispers still gnawed at her mind, urging her to return to the shadows, to bide her time and strike again. But somewhere deep within her fractured soul, a flicker of humanity remained. She gripped the dagger tightly and began to carve symbols into her flesh, her blood pooling at her feet. The ancient runes glowed faintly as she whispered the words of the ritual. Her voice trembling with both fear and defiance, the earth beneath her trembled as the blood moon's essence surged through her, fighting to maintain its grip. Shadows danced around her, screaming in fury as she completed the incantation. Mia's body convulsed, her veins glowing crimson as the curse tried to tear her apart from within. She raised the dagger high, tears streaming down her face, and plunged it into her heart. A blinding light erupted from her chest, consuming the forest and spreading outward in a wave of purifying. The moon's essence screamed as it was ripped from her body, dissipating into the void. When the light faded, the forest was transformed. The twisted, gnarled trees stood tall and proud, their leaves shimmering in the sunlight. The air was crisp and clean, free of the oppressive weight that had haunted it for so long. Mia's body lay at the center of the clearing, her face peaceful for the first time in years. The dagger, now dull and lifeless, rested beside her. The curse was gone. The townspeople, sensing the shift, returned to their lives with cautious hope. Crescent Woods was no longer a place of terror, but a memorial to the sacrifices made to end the Blood Moon's reign. Carter and Mia's names became legends, their stories passed down as cautionary tales about the dangers of greed, fear, and unchecked power. Years later, the town hosted an annual festival to honor those who had fought against the Blood Moon. Children dressed as heroes, stories were told, and candles were lit in remembrance, but deep in the heart of Crescent Woods, beneath the roots of an ancient tree, the faintest glimmer of crimson light pulsed, hidden from the world, for though the Blood Moon had been banished, curses never truly die. They merely wait for the right moment to rise again. This ending provides closure to the story while leaving a chilling hint of the curse's potential return. The blend of sacrifice, redemption, and lingering horror ensures a satisfying conclusion while maintaining an unrelenting sense of dread.